Mayor and Council meeting tonight. I'm sitting for Mayor Watkins tonight to pick up the session. Just a couple notes before we start the statement. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by sending notice on December 24th, 2010 to the record at the Ridgewood News, by posting on a bulletin board in the lobby in the Borough Hall, and filing notice at the same to the municipal clerk. I'd like to remind everybody in the building that there are 3 exits in this room. Roll call.
Councilman Bartoloni?
Here.
Councilman Muscaritolo?
Here.
Councilman Porco?
Here.
Councilman McNone?
Here.
Councilman Cannon?
Here.
Councilman Quartz?
Here.
And Mayor Watkins.
To start off with the borough administrative topics, regarding the bus shelter.
Thank you, Mr. President, if I may. We had presented a concept to the Mayor and Council to seek an outside service to replace and then maintain the bus shelters. And as part of that agreement, there would be advertising on the bus shelters. The borough would receive some revenue from the advertising. They would take over maintenance for litter, graffiti, snow removal, maintenance of the facilities themselves. There's a form of agreement that the companies that do this use that was given to the borough attorney to analyze. We did a review of it and raised several points, questions and comments, which he also looked at. In undertaking that review, he has some concerns with regard to the requirements that they would like to see. And I think we should be given the opportunity to talk about the review of that concept and where it is right now. He's also given us a legal opinion as to the fact that it should be considered a concession under the local public contracts law, and that would guide us in terms of how this would be bid out, as well as the relationship to our zoning ordinance. So with that, I would refer to the borough attorney to provide his report on this.
Yeah, my opinion is as follows. I mean, I have a concern as to the location of the bus shelters in relationship to the residential district. The west side of Kinnickinnick Road, as you know, is in the one-family zone district. I think that district would be most impacted by the placement of the shelters with the signage. It's not that you can't do the signage. In my opinion, you probably should adopt an ordinance as opposed to just placing the signage at these locations. In the instances where most of the signage appears, where these companies do function within certain municipalities, they generally function better on a commercial zone, a commercial district. So if these shelters were primarily located, let's say, on the east side of Kinnickinnick Road, I think you would have less an impact on the residential zone. If you were to go forward with this particular agreement, my thinking would be is that you would probably have to adopt an ordinance to prevent this type of signage at the location we are talking about. I have reviewed some of the cases involving the co-partnering with private sector. One of the leading cases was a Troy Hills case involving cell towers, where the cell tower was located on municipal property, and that certain providers, private providers, were allowed to place antennae on the tower. And the court basically sustained, it was challenged by a local citizen group. It was sustained on the basis that there was an overriding public interest in having the facility, because it also serviced, allowed connections and service area for communication. With the signage, it's primarily a proprietary interest that the borough's fostering, in the sense that we can make money out of putting the signage on these facilities. As I indicated, my thinking is that it isn't that you cannot do that. I would suggest that we have a zoning ordinance, and then you would have to delineate what type of signage, the size of the signage, what sides of the facility is going to be covered with the signage. My thought is, and just was another proposal, if we were to go that route, I would say adopt an ordinance, and then you're going to have to regulate the type of signage you're going to permit in these particular shelters. As I had indicated, if it was on the west side of the road, where you would face, your service stations, your restaurants, and so forth, probably less an impact, because it's more of an urban type situation, where you have signage and advertising and so forth. I think it has a more dramatic impact where you have residences on the west side of the road. I don't consider Kinnekumack Road to be equivalent to, let's say, Main Street, Hackensack, which typically has commercial operations on both sides of the road. Another thought occurred to me, I know we've done this in the past, and that was essentially to do a situation where we would acquire the bus shelters from the DOT, and then what we would consider doing would be to see if we could get various commercial businesses to adopt the shelter. We would then go out, try to get a bid or a contractor who would service the shelter, let's say once a month, and then you would advertise, if it was a restaurant, you could have a restaurant advertise the shelter as being having adopted the shelter, which they would be responsible for maintaining it. Rather than have the commercial entity physically maintain it, we would go out and hire someone, build the various companies and businesses that would adopt a shelter. This way we would have a shelter, we could maintain and clean it, but at the cost of having someone in town bear the cost. It would give them a little bit of advertising. It's the same thing you see on these signage where you have adopt a highway. We have done it with landscaping in the past. We've had different landscape companies maintain certain landscaped areas in our municipality, which would allow a certain type of sign to be placed on the property to indicate that they are maintaining the property. I think it's more of a quality of life situation. Although there's revenue to be made by having the signage, I think it would impact, there's no doubt there's an impact issue with reference to the residential areas where a lot of the bus shelters are located. Most people are going south on Kinnekumack Road, and the bulk of our shelters are on the west side of the Kinnekumack corridor.